Their backs to the wall, civil society under pressure in Hungary. Pressen mot NGOs i Ungern är rubriken och vi välkomnar Orsolya Jeney, hon är generalsekreterare för Amnesty i Ungern, Attila Mong som är ungersk journalist och samtalet leds av Ulf B. Andersson från Amnesty Press. Ni är hjärtligt välkomna och ni får en applåd här.
Tack.
Tack så jättemycket. I will speak in English now. I'm the editor-in-chief of this magazine, Amnesty Press, and I think that you can pick it up at Amnesty's monter. I would also just mention briefly that there is a new book about Hungary just issued by Silk Förlag, and they have the monter over there. I read it yesterday. It's called Hej herr diktator. It was the phrase that Jean-Claude Juncker used at the EU summit in Riga. And it's very interesting booklet. I have two guests here, and we will start about the present refugee crisis and the situation at the Hungarian borders. Orsi, you were visiting this area just recently. Can you tell us what is your impression? What did you see?
Yes, we've spent quite a few days of the past few weeks at the Hungarian border where a lot of refugees got stuck just right after Hungary has changed its laws. It was actually last Tuesday, it's not even 2 weeks ago, I think, which basically meant that these people who are fleeing wars and persecution do not actually have access to the Hungarian territory. They cannot apply for asylum. And if they try to cross the fence, because Hungary, you might have heard, has also built a fence, then they can be put to jail until 3 years. We were actually also at trials just the day before I left. And it is very heartbreaking to see how all these people in need are just being almost thrown out of Hungary and thus from Europe. But I have to underline that this is not just Hungary's shame. I think it's also European shame.
But so you mean today they are prevented from entering Hungary, but they can also be sent to prison? And that's happening now?
They can be sent to prison if they cross the border illegally, meaning the fence. But so far there have been already about 100 cases and nobody was yet sent to prison. Of course, Hungary just wants to get them out of the country. And usually they get a ban from entering Hungary for 1 or 2 years. And sometimes, it's not clear, it varies. But sometimes also it means from Schengen. I mean, this is something we will need to see. But definitely Hungary is currently violating the law of the refugees.
There was an interview with the Hungarian foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó.
Yes, Szijjártó.
In BBC's Hard Talk just 2 days ago, I think. And he was saying that Hungary is just defending Europe's border. There is an international media campaign against Hungary now. Do the Hungarians, do they believe their foreign minister?
I think some of them do, because they have voted on this government, but luckily there were also a lot of Hungarians who from their free time and from their pocket have actually upheld a whole system of humanitarian crisis. But what struck me from this Hard Talk interview was that our our foreign minister was stating unfactually true things, I mean false things. This is what the government likes to say. They speak as if these people were attacking our countries and that we need to protect our borders. I think the sentence itself that we need to protect our borders can be fine if there is aggression against our country. Refugees are not aggression to our country. These people are the same people as the people from 1956 in Hungary who did have to flee for their countries. And instead of opening our, hearts and fulfilling our obligations, we just let them out and we portray these people as if they were a danger to Hungarian society. And my feeling is, but Attila, maybe you can also add, that actually, unfortunately, a lot of Hungarians who only hear from the public media, I do think they believe that they are a danger to our society, and this makes me very, very sad.
Yeah, this is some sort of bitter irony that next year we will commemorate the anniversary of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. And as you said, 200,000 Hungarians left the country within a few weeks. 8,000 of them got asylum in Sweden. So they were helped by the outside world. Attila Mong, you are one of the most distinguished Hungarian journalists, now deputy editor-in-chief of the website atlasu.hu. How is this crisis at the Hungarian border, how is it described in mainstream Hungarian media?
So the crisis showed very well how the government have taken control of mainstream media the last 5 years. So the Prime Minister is in power for now 5 years, and one of his first initiatives was to change the media legislation, and the last 5 years the government and the governing party was working very hard to take a grip on mainstream media and to hold a grip on mainstream media. And the refugee crisis showed very well that the narrative of the government is prevailing. The narrative which Orsi quoted is that there is a threat, we have to protect our borders, these people are not refugees, they are migrants who come to Europe for the sake of a better life. So this is the main arc of the government's narrative. And the mainstream media, especially the state media, is following very, very closely. So the Hungarian, what you would call public media, but I would rather call it like government-controlled state media, is basically using the same words and the same expressions to describe the situation as the government. So they never speak about refugees, almost never use the word refugees. They are only speaking about migrants. And in Hungarian, the word migrant, or in Hungarian we say migráns, is a foreign word. So average people don't necessarily understand what it is. It's something which makes them afraid. It's a threat. So this is what the government wants to create. They want to create an atmosphere of threat and danger in which the government and the party can come up and say, we will protect you. So besides the state-controlled media, there is large areas of the private media.
Yeah, just a second.
Yeah, okay.
So it means that when the Prime Minister Viktor Orban is saying, and I quote, "Our borders are in danger. Our way of life built on the respect for the law, and Hungary and the whole of Europe is in danger." When he's saying that, most Hungarians, they will believe it.
Yeah, they will believe it because that's the narrative, mostly that's the narrative they get. And you have to understand that after 5 years of government, the popularity of the Prime Minister and the party had slowly degraded. So beginning of this year, when the Charlie Hebdo attack happened, the Prime Minister recognized that this is a great political opportunity for him to bring back the party. And he found the immigration topic as the main topic. They are doing everything around this topic now. And not surprisingly, they are coming up in the polls. So a lot of people believe, definitely.
Okay, and we just add that the main opposition in Hungary today is the extreme right-wing party, Jobbik. Back to the other media, alternative media, or what you call it. Can this tremendous support that is shown by ordinary Hungarians and Jews, can this support be shown to Hungarians in other medias?
Yeah, so definitely the state media will, I don't think they have ever shown NGOs or people spontaneously helping, because we have to add that there was an outpour of love from average Hungarians in Budapest. There was really a very tough situation. A lot of tens of thousands of people were in the capital and marching in the countryside, but people were coming and helping. So this was really important. It doesn't appear in the state media. In private media, there are two main commercial TV stations. One of them is more independent. It's controlled by RTL, which is a big big multinational group, and I think they had a more balanced coverage and they presented a more complex view. There is another TV channel which is controlled by pro-government businessmen. And in the private media, online and print, there are large areas of several companies which are private, but the businessmen behind these outlets and these newspapers are pro-government. They make business with the state. They get funding from different European Union tenders and European Union funded projects, infrastructure projects. So they are very much interested in keeping a good relationship with the government, these businessmen, and of course their media is pretty much following the government's line.
Okay, let us just talk a bit about the NGOs in Hungary. There has been an orchestrated attack against NGOs which receive grants from Norway. Orsi, can you explain how the government see upon these NGOs? They are foreign agents, or what they call them?
We were very surprised that such a thing would happen in Hungary, because this would be pretty much something Russia would do. But actually, I think it was August 2014, our Prime Minister did say in a very important speech of his that there's a certain group of NGOs who are paid political activists. They serve foreign interests. He did say actually these words. He would not even hide. And then there was actually an orchestrated attack, as you mentioned, Ulf. It was a very politically motivated attack when the government wanted to prove that these groups are serving different interests. These groups include Transparency International, it includes Hungarian Civil Liberties Union, and originally it included Amnesty International. I don't know what you Swedish people think, but I think you would never think that Amnesty is serving foreign political interests and is paid by, foreign interests. So they were trying to prove this. They caused a lot of damage to the reputation of the NGOs. They lost a lot of credibility, some of them. Plus, I personally as well, I must admit that I was never afraid, but as a director of a section, I did have a third level of stress. Every time we would do anything, I felt that we needed to prove, in case one day they come, because you know how these things were, when they are politically motivated and there's no chance for guarantees that it is impartial, they just, they find you for anything. And that was a very sad moment. I come from Romania. I was born as an oppressed Hungarian minority under the Romanian dictatorship. And as a human rights defender, I was again very upset when my level of stress was also because of state intimidation. It has passed now. Now it's the migrants, the migrants who are now the target groups. Nobody said sorry to the NGOs. Nobody said that whatever we were trying to prove were not valid. It's just there. These NGOs are being, some of them ruined in the eyes who only listen to public media. And it's on the other side, they are, of course, very important NGOs to secure the rule of law in Hungary and uphold human rights.
As you said, this is something that Amnesty in February said that this is inspired by what Putin is doing in Russia against the NGOs. Attila, there was a famous speech by the Prime Minister Viktor Orban last summer when he spoke about illiberal democracy, mentioning China, Turkey and Russia as examples. Do you believe that Viktor Orban is drifting away from European values and getting closer to Moscow?
Yeah, based on what he's saying in his speeches and his actions, I think it's not an understatement to say that Hungary is drifting away from Brussels and from the European values. It's not only this one speech. Viktor Orban used several times the same terminology describing the regimes in Russia, China, Turkey as exemplary regimes which are quick to act, while Europe is just debating and discussing and nothing happens. So he's criticizing the European Union, he's criticizing very strongly capitalism and also the democratic institutions. And in this famous speech, he mentioned that there is not only one kind of democracy, there are several kinds of democracy, and Hungary might follow the illiberal way of democracy. And of course the actions somehow reflect. I mean, the raid on NGOs is definitely that thing, the occupation of democratic institutions, the eliminating of checks and balances, including the constitutional courts, all show that he's pursuing a very strict political agenda which aims to bring Hungary further away from the European Union. And at the same time, there is a geopolitical game in Eastern Europe, of course, because Eastern Europe and Central Europe is very much reliant on Russian energy and Russian gas. But instead, I mean, we have a prime minister who publicly say all the time that we have to defend our national interests, but he signed a deal with Russia to expand the nuclear station in Hungary, so build 2 more new reactors. So instead of diminishing the Russian influence, because it's very important because of the gas, we are signing a huge deal to expand the nuclear station, which is also Russian financed. So Russian money is financing. We have Russian loans to finance for the next 20 years the nuclear energy. So this is binding Hungary more closely to Russia than ever before.
And just a fun fact, now after midnight, after the Hungarian national anthem, you hear Russian news channel on the national TV after midnight, since few days.
No, don't talk. Yeah. So, of course, Viktor Orbán started his political career in 1989. Some of you might remember he had a very famous speech in Budapest when he was calling the Soviet army to leave the country. So this is the political career upside down.
Yeah. Interesting. We have to just move back to 2010. You mentioned the media law introduced by the Fidesz government and Viktor Orbán. You became almost world famous after a special protest. Can you just say what did you do and did it have any effect?
So in 2010, when in fact one of the first actions of the newly elected government that time was to introduce the new media legislation. At that time I was working for the Hungarian National Public Radio. I was the host of the morning show, the morning program, and after the news break, with my editor, we included 1 minute of silence as a kind of protest against the media legislation, and consequently we were fired from the National Public Radio basically a couple of months later. But the media law was just an introduction to what happened on the media market. It created a legal framework to centralize and occupy public media, which is now simply a government mouthpiece, and to introduce rules and regulations which make it easier to control public media and to influence the private media and to influence the content of private media.
And you can consider the introduction of the media law as a defeat for the opposition in Hungary, and there has been a lot of defeats during the last few years. The only success is that the internet tax was stopped. But in the future, what can the outside world, what can Sweden do concerning Hungary? Do you have any ideas?
Of course I do. I'm working to, protect human rights and save the world a little bit. I think it's really, really important to remember that this is not only about Hungary. I think it's about Europe as well, and it's about our future. Do we allow such things to happen in our own courts? I mean, not court, but garden, or do we stand up really for human rights? Because I'm sure, you are Swedish people, you are pretty high on respecting human rights, so I think for you it's not that difficult to understand where a word could lead without respecting human rights. So I think it's always important to show pressure if it's needed. It's very important to stand up for the rights of whoever in which sense, but it's for the Europe. It's for the future of Europe that we all have to act, I think.
Okay, that will be the last word for this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Orsolya, Jeney, Attila, Mong, Andersson. Vi går raskt vidare. Här är